targets in Yemen in a signal chat with top White House officials that accidentally included a journalist. Now the New York Times and others report Hegseth shared the same details in a group chat, including his wife and brother. Hegseth responded at a White House Easter event.
This is what the media does. They take anonymous sources from disgruntled former employees, and then they try to slash and burn people and ruin their reputations. Not going to work with me.
In the past week, 4 senior advisors to Hegseth have left abruptly, some accused of leaking. They have all released public statements suggesting infighting within the Department of Defense. Quill Lawrence, NPR News.
Students at Florida State University are heading back to class today. Regan McCarthy from member station WFSU reports some students say it's still too soon to return to campus after last week's deadly shooting.
Olivia Wyszynski spent Sunday afternoon walking through campus with her mom and sister.
Because I didn't want coming to class on Monday by myself to be the first time I came back to campus.
University officials are offering flexibility for students who aren't yet ready to return.
That's Regan McCarthy from member station WFSU reporting. You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Gabrielle Dawkins. A flood advisory is in place for another hour. The greater Houston area took in an unexpected amount of rain this morning, specifically for folks down south and along the coast. Janice Maldonado is a meteorologist with the National Weather Service. She says in general, the area picked up between 1 and 4 inches of rain.
In 2 locations, they have received 4.5, even 5 inches, isolated area with 5 inches. This is over the past 24 hours. Rain continue, especially for areas across southeast Harris County.
The heavy rain is expected to gradually taper off throughout the day, but we could get some more isolated storms this afternoon. And East End residents are upset about a lack of community engagement around the planned closure of Polk Street. Houston First Corporation wants to close down a downtown portion of the road as part of its expansion of the George R. Brown Convention Center. News 88.7's Dominic Anthony Walsh reports the city plans to close it in October.
At what this could potentially look like by roughly 2038. I know, it seems like
Houston First CEO Michael Heckman spoke to a tough crowd during a community meeting in March when he told them it could take more than a decade for east-west connectivity to be restored. In the meantime, the city is considering turning nearby Leland Street into a two-way road.
And it's still not equivalent to Polk. Polk has a grade separation. Leland doesn't.
Eastwood resident Amy Erickson wants to see another community meeting before public comment closes on May 1st.
They were apologizing about the lack of community engagement, but here we are again with just silence.
Area Councilmember Joaquin Martinez says another meeting is in the works. I'm Dominic Anthony Walsh, News 88.7.
And in sports, the Astros lost to the San Diego Padres yesterday, 3-2. Houston was trying to secure the sweep in the series, but they could not. They will take on the Toronto Blue Jays coming up in their next game. I'm Gabrielle Dawkins, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance with its Name Your Price tool, a way to see coverage options based on a driver's budget. Learn more at progressive.com or 1-800-PROGRESSIVE. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Live from the University of Houston, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manouse, Celeste Díaz Schurman, and Frank Billingsley.
Hello there, Houston, on a kind of dreary, rainy Monday out there.
Did you hear the thunder this morning?
I sure did.
Did you actually?
It woke me up at 5 in the morning.
I got to stop you right here and say, Frank, did I actually hear it scared you?
I didn't know what it was. I mean, I just heard something. I mean, I have terrible hearing anyway. And a lot of thunder I can actually sleep through. But I heard something. I'm like, what was that? And Kevin said, thunder. And I'm like, oh, nice. And then it continued. So,
at our house, it was one of those things where my daughter's a very light sleeper. So she immediately woke up, came into our bed first thing in the morning. Yes. And, we made the mistake of letting them watch Jurassic Park. And so they're...
That would do it.
They were being chased by a dinosaur.
Yes.
What was
so
happening.
I had two little ones in my bed.
Which reminds me, if you want to see some dinosaurs, you can always go to YouTube and see Frank and I sitting here with Celeste.
Speak for yourself already.
I said we were the dinosaurs. Let
me on a more serious note, Ernie. There are some strong storms moving through Galveston, Brazoria County, all the way to Matagorda Bay. So be careful of those. There's some warnings, some flood issues. We had 2 to 5 inches of rain in some spots on the southeast side. So be careful out there and drive safely. If you don't have to get out in it, don't.
Yeah. Is it going to get worse?
No, I think it's going to move on through. It's a very slow-moving boundary. It's going to move through. I don't think we're going to see much more rain, like 20% for tonight. But every day this week has some chance of rain, especially Wednesday.
So I know earlier when we were chatting about this, Ernie asked you, Frank, so is it going to rain for the next 10 Mondays?
No, it doesn't work like that. It's only Easter. If it rains on Easter, I didn't get any rain yesterday.
Yeah, we had a very nice Easter. After slight warnings, concern.
We had slight drizzles in our West Houston area.
A little, and then I went to my Greek Easter that you weren't invited to, even though you're Greek.
He loves to bring
They
that
were all
up.
concerned about the rain, but
were they concerned about me?
It was fine. I told them.
Where's
the story.
our Greek?
I said, I work with a Greek. You didn't invite him. They said next year you can come with me.
You'll be the honorary.
That's sweet. Kevin can sit home with my mom. So how that'll work. Anyway, remember you can watch us live on YouTube. You can find us on the Houston Public Media channel, or just go to hellohouston.org and there's an orange banner and you can click watch live and you can see what we're doing right here in the studio. Coming up on the show today, we've got a lot of topics we are going to hit on. We are going to be talking about the environment with this Senate bill that's coming up. We're going to be looking at the world of AI. And of course, we're going to lead this off, I'm sure, with the passing of the Pope.
Yeah. That's right.
Celeste, you begin us off each day with our topics.
That's right. Many of us woke up to the news that Pope Francis died early this morning on Easter Monday, at the age of 88. Pope Francis was the 266th Pope and spiritual leader of more than 1 billion Catholics worldwide. He was the first non-European head of the Roman Catholic Church in over a millennium. And that's a period of over 1,000 years. So he was elected to his post in 2013, and during his tenure, most U.S. Catholics have regarded Pope Francis as an agent of change. The Pope gained significant popularity for being a strong advocate for the poor and for the environment. He became a towering figure on the world stage, addressing not just Catholics, but also the men and women of our time. What are your thoughts and memories of the legacy of Pope Francis? Give us a call, 713-440-8870. Pope Francis made a rare public appearance yesterday on Easter Sunday, less than a month after he had just been discharged from the hospital following a very lengthy illness that, people were really concerned about if he was going to be able to make it. And it was a respiratory infection and bilateral pneumonia that he had been recovering from. Before he died, Pope Francis met briefly Sunday morning with Vice President J.D. Vance. And again, we want to hear from you. Give us a call, 713-440-8870.
There was a lot of news about J.D. Vance not seeing the Pope, about then a papal emissary coming and speaking to J.D. Vance and giving him a stern warning, some reports gave. And it's interesting that the Pope did make time to see him. I'm very curious to find out, if we ever will find out, what their conversation actually was, how much of a conversation there was. It does go to show, though, that it's very likely the reason he initially hadn't met with J.D. Vance was he was obviously very ill. You said a rare appearance, but it was only rare because he had been ill. But before that, he had been such an accessible Pope. Yeah. I think in a lot of people's minds, he made you feel closer to the papacy because he was always involved and engaged in the world beyond the Vatican walls.
My word for him is kind. He just seemed like he was full of kindness.
Yeah,
and on all fronts. And he accepted so many people. And advocated, like you said, for the poor, but really for anyone that was disenfranchised in whatever way. It seemed like that Pope really cared about that person or those people. And he was just a kind man. I wonder, that John Adams and Thomas Jefferson both died on July 4th. 1826, 50 years to the day of signing the Declaration of Independence. I wonder if the Pope thought, I'm going to make it to Easter, and that's what he did.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it wouldn't surprise
me. He could rest.
I mean, that's the holiest of holy days.
What I found very interesting is Pope Francis was one of the older popes to take up his papacy, and yet he was so highly regarded by so many young people and young Catholics. And I was reading more about him this morning, and according to the Pew Research Center, Catholics who view Pope Francis unfavorably were especially likely to say he represented a major change or shift within the Catholic Church.
And will be interesting to see if it will shift back more to the right. Much of the world has shifted right. And when he came on as Pope in 2013, that was just after, right in the middle of Obama's second term. And he really shifted things, I wouldn't say to the left, but more left, I mean, his openness and his kindness were so evident, and he accepted, it seemed like everyone. He was a supporter of almost anyone, as long as they were a good person.
He was open to having conversations about communities that for such a long time within the Catholic Church were viewed as absolutes. No, we do not believe in X. And I think the change that Pope Francis brought was that he was saying, no, wait a minute, we're going to talk about this.
He still did not get into the roles, he kept the roles of men and women separate.
Yes.
That is what it is. And he absolutely said no to changing that, although I think it was addressed.
Yeah, he had conversations.
Women will not be priests.
He understood nuance, and he understood a changing world. And what's really kind of fascinating is early in his religious career, he had some scandal and stepped away and reflected on it and came back. And I think that's what made him the understanding Pope.
Nobody's perfect.
Right. He went through challenges and saw through it and saw, we have to understand the world around us. We will make mistakes. There was a forgiveness.
And became Pope when there was a Pope. Remember, the Pope had stepped down.
Right.
And that was the first time that had ever happened.
That was a big scandal.
It was just a big thing, So to come in as a new Pope when the old Pope is still alive, that you have to, I think, really be a leader to do something like that.
In our second hour, we will talk more about the Pope, and we'll speak with an expert about his career and his papacy. But it's fascinating to see. He was almost like a great press agent for the Catholic Church in a lot of ways. He went out there and he reintroduced it to a world that seemed to be turning away from religion. And like you said, young people found a fondness for him, a connection with him. It'll be interesting, like you said, to see in a world that is moving so much more conservative, will the Catholic Church continue on this slow step towards a little bit more liberal and acceptance, or will it join the rest of the world in a time where things are more pulled back?
We shall see.
It'll be very interesting.
Yeah.
Tell us what you think. Let us know your thoughts and feelings on the Pope and his papacy and his career in the Vatican. Curious to see what you all think.
Yep. 713-440-8870.
Keeping on the theme of religion, we're going to move to the White House, and it's the first time that they have solicited. Well, because we're getting back to Easter here. We're getting back there.
Kigo segues. I don't know. That was
I'm usually good at my segues.
It's not exactly religion at the White House that I've
seen. They were soliciting corporate sponsorship for the annual Easter egg roll that's held today on the South Lawn. This comes as billionaire tech executives have faced growing criticism for cozying up to the Trump administration. Quote, in addition to the classic Easter roll or egg roll and egg hunt, both featuring real small and medium-sized eggs donated by American egg farmers, guests will enjoy a wide array of entertaining activities thanks to the White House Historical Association and its partnerships, said the White House in a statement. Listed among the sponsors were companies like YouTube, Amazon, and Facebook and Instagram parent company Meta. CNN was first reported earlier this month that the White House had begun courting sponsors for the typically apolitical family gathering at between $75,000 and $200,000. White House says the money raised will go to the White House Historical Association, a nonprofit. Is it right for this administration to commercialize an annual event? Is it commercializing it? 713-440-8870.
Well, I don't go, so I don't care.
This is well, to me, this says more about who the White House is for than it does about the commercialization of it. I remember hearing an interview with Michelle Obama, and she was speaking about how the reason it was so important for her when she was within the White House as the First Lady to make sure that the White House represented that it was a White House of the people. Right. It was for everybody. And to me, this is basically saying it's sending a very clear message today that the White House is not for everyone. It's who can afford it. And, I think it's interesting that they would do real eggs and not plastic eggs with candy in it.
That part fascinates me the most.
30,000 real eggs.
Yeah, put those into
$10
the egg system.
a dozen? I wonder what they paid for them.
Well, that's why you needed sponsorship.
I guess so.
I guess my take on it is, and yes, I think, the White House is for all people. I don't believe that this became a cost event for anyone to come to. They do curate who goes to events like this.
It's on a lottery system now.
So it's not total randomness, and it's not just anyone gets in. You have to. But these events cost money. And if the administration, now I'm not supporting this idea, I'm just trying to flesh out the concept behind it. If we are going to be in an age of Doge where we're cutting all of wasteless spending and people are losing their jobs left and right, to foot the government, not necessarily the White House, but the Government Historical Society, to foot the bill of such an expensive event probably looks worse than to say, we're still going to hold this event to make it fiscally responsible. We're looking for corporate underwriting. It does have an uncomfortable patina to it, but it is a way to say we do care about costs and we're not just throwing money away. You want to have this event? People step up and pay for it. Now, I don't know how they did the signage. I don't know if it was like the YouTube egg roll, the Amazon egg hunt. I didn't know how they branded it out and what you got for your sponsorships. But an interesting concept. Should events that are open to the public, thrown by the government at whatever branch and whatever level, should it have corporate sponsorship so they're not using taxpayer money? Give us a call, 713-440-8870.
I hear you. And yes, if you're going to be fiscally responsible. However, it's going to the White House Historical Association, a nonprofit. Who is behind the nonprofit? And do we know how these funds will be
lots of questions
allocated?
Yeah.
The eggs were donated, by the way, by American farmers, according to NPR.
Yes.
Okay.
But my point about it is if they had gone into the food chain with that or into the supply chain of eggs, did we need to lose 30,000 eggs to a roll on
Are they going to
line?
be?
I would like to see the sheet of what it really costs,
Yeah.
and where the profits of this are going to go, and how much is going to go. I know it's going to the White House Historical Foundation, but how much? How much of it is going to go to that?
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know. I mean, I understand somewhat of the logic behind it, but I think the problem comes when it is our federal government and it is for all people. Should you feel excluded? Should your name not be included in something because you couldn't pony up this much money? Does it a haves and a have-not scenario built? We are the important companies because we got to sponsor this. And as I understand, there is a luncheon that went along with it. And who got invited to that luncheon? Was it the CEO Tex who put in all this money, so therefore they got to go?
You know what it is? I don't like the pay to play.
And that's what's happened.
I don't like that type of
if it
putting
is,
anything.
We need to know
play.
the details to know, was it a pay to play or was it just a sponsorship like Target
It was
would
still an
sponsor
ask
something?
by the President of the United States. And when the President asks you to sponsor something, you pony up.
Right.
I don't. Who said no? I would like to know that. Did
Well, I don't
anybody
know if
say
the
no?
president actively solicited it or
Well,
if
the
it
White
was
House
the White
did
House.
on his behalf.
And just to clarify, aside from children whose families have political connections, children are invited through a lottery for guests from all 56 U.S. states and territories.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think your pay to play is the point of all of this.
Yeah.
I know. I'd be interested in what people have to say about it. 713-440-8870. If in fact you care. I mean, some people may say, well, if corporations want to pay, let them pay.
Yeah.
Well, I will tell you this as we wrap up this segment. Today is National Kindergarten Day. Oh, see, I knew that would be a nice,
that
warm,
is a
fuzzy
nice,
one. The
warm,
other one is
fuzzy
it's
one.
National Yellow Bat Day. Are they talking about baseball bats that are yellow, or are they talking about flying bats that are
They're talking
yellow?
about the flying bats, which Philip was a bat for Halloween. He
A yellow one?
not
bat?
a yellow
I
bat.
never
What's
heard
a
of
yellow
such
bat?
thing. We'll look it
Yeah.
up. Also, Golden State Warriors beat the Rockets. Sorry, 95-85 in Game 1 of the first round
beat
Western
the
Conference playoff series last night. Game 2 was on Wednesday night. Yeah, you yippied
I
before
thought
you
it
realized
was-
they had lost.
Yeah, I saw Rockets 95. And
Oh, they are flying bats, are yellow bats. The flying bats.
Flying bat. I don't like
Maybe
but they're
that means
very
when you
good
hit
for the
ball, you let
environment.
the
They're very
bat
good for
go
the
and it's
environment. We want bats in our
We do.
environment.
They're very good. All righty, folks. Celeste, wrap us up on this segment. Get us out of here.
Coming up on Hello Houston, we'll discuss a proposed Senate bill that aims to help environment regulations on solar and wind energy projects. But it also has some environmental agencies concerned. And we're also taking your calls on today's topics at 713-440-8870. This is Hello Houston on News 88.7.
When severe weather hits, when power goes out, when the roads are dangerous, this is the station that keeps you up to date and informed.
You've counted on Houston Public Media during past storms, and we'll be here during the next one too, but only with your support.
Your gift today helps make sure this newsroom is ready 24/7 to deliver you critical information when it matters most.
You can make that happen. Give now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
Houston Public Media brings to you PBS World. Experience the personal connection behind the headlines with programming devoted to telling stories that humanize complex issues. PBS World on TV 8.6 and online at houstonpublicmedia.org.
Support comes from UT Austin's McCombs School of Business, offering the Weekend MBA in Houston. Classes held in person on alternating weekends. Campus visit April 25th and 26th. Registration available at texasmba.com. Make it here. Support comes from Novotny & Company, offering commercial and residential property tax protests for 38 years. The deadline to file a protest is May 21st in Harris County. Info and online filing at novotnycompany.com. Support comes from the Houston Zoo, presenting its annual Feast with the Beasts. Cuisine from a number of Houston's diverse eateries, animal experiences, live music, and more. May 2nd. More at houstonzoo.org. Support comes from DePelchin Children's Center. April is National Child Abuse Prevention Month, and for more than 130 years, DePelchin has worked to ensure that Houston area children are part of safe and loving families. Learn more at depelchin.org. Support comes from John Moore, helping with plumbing, electrical, and air conditioning repairs, including out-of-warranty units since 1965. Details at 730-2525 or at johnmooreservices.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. To share your thoughts on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's Ernie Manouse, Celeste Díaz Schurman, and Frank Billingsley.
And welcome back.
Hello.
Hello there. As you just heard Jim say, for any of our topics today, feel free to reach out to us, give us a call, or email us. We'll be talking more about the Pope in the second hour. So if Pope Francis impacted your life, let us know your feelings, your thoughts. 713-440-8870 or email us talk@hellohouston.org.
Last week, the Texas Senate passed Senate Bill 819, which would require new permits, fees, taxes, and regulations on solar and wind energy projects. The bill is now headed to the House for a vote. The authors of the bill say it's in an effort to protect the environment. But critics are raising the alarm and say it will do the exact opposite while simultaneously setting back the state's energy sector at a time when the power grid is already strained. To tell us more, we welcome Luke Metzger, the Executive Director of Environmental Texas. Luke, good morning. Welcome to Hello Houston.
Good morning. Great to be on. Thanks.
So SB 18, like we were just talking about, it's really trying to regulate renewable energy, and it's going to specifically looking at generation facilities, particularly wind and solar projects. Why don't you begin with what is the concern that y'all are seeing with SB 819?
Well, it's clear that wind and solar energy are providing enormous benefits to our environment in terms of cutting deadly air pollution, reducing greenhouse gas emissions that are fueling the climate crisis, conserving water, and on and on. It's also true that Texas is currently losing about 1,000 acres of land every day to their development. And most of that loss is due to housing sprawl, as well as oil and gas, rock quarries, other uses. But as wind and solar energy have boomed in recent years, they are also taking up some land. And so that's where we're getting some of these concerns. And it is reasonable to try and find ways to limit the impact to our open space and wildlife from all forms of development and all forms of energy. Unfortunately, this bill singles out wind and solar really unfairly with this discriminatory and capricious permitting regime, which could grind renewable energy development to a halt. And at a time when during this climate crisis where we desperately need as much clean energy as possible, that would be a real huge setback for our environment.
So from what I read, sir, this is Frank Billingsley, some of the requirements would be that you have to have a property owner's permission to put a wind turbine within a certain number of feet from the property line. That doesn't seem unreasonable. So that I don't think that anybody would object to that. Would you?
Yeah, I don't think the setbacks are the biggest problem at all. For example, they would say that, if you want to build a solar facility within 200 feet or closer than 200 feet to the property line, you'd have to get the neighboring property owner's permission. I think that's fine.
Or pay for it, presumably.
Or pay for it,
Yeah.
Exactly. The biggest problem is that for the first time ever, wind and solar would have to get a permit from the Public Utility Commission. No other energy source, a nuclear plant, a gas plant, a coal plant has to get a similar kind of permit. And it's a very subjective process. It says that the PUC shall deny the permit if they decide that the harm outweighs the benefits. It doesn't specify what the harm is or what the benefits. A very subjective process. And so the fear then is that there could be political interference, that if a wealthy landowner doesn't want to see solar farm next to their property, they call the governor, call the PUC, and get the project canceled. And so because there's so much uncertainty then in this permitting process, unlike every other form of energy, it could be very difficult for a project developer to get the financing to move forward. So that's why we could basically see wind and solar stop developing in the state.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, we have more wind turbines in Texas than all the other states combined.
Not all of them, but the next several states combined.
Yeah, I mean,
we're number one for wind power, number two for solar power.
Right.
And that's great news. That's providing huge environmental benefits as well as helping save consumers about $1 billion a month on our electric bills, helping, revitalize rural economies, put more tax revenues into schools. So we're having all these huge benefits. And then finally, and most importantly, perhaps, is, to the grid reliability. In the last 4 years, since Winter Storm Uri, we've added about 35% more generation to our electric grid. 93% of that new generation was wind, solar, or batteries. So as demand for electricity is booming in the state in order to meet demand for AI, data centers, et cetera, renewables are really helping keep the lights on. And if this bill passes, we would be tying one arm behind our back and being much more difficult to meet demand for electricity in the coming years.
Would it be for current wind and solar energy also? Would you have to go and get those permitted that have not been permitted for all these years?
Yes, it had to be for new generation as well as if you repower an old facility. So, for example, perhaps you want to put in a stronger wind turbine or longer blades, then you would have to get a permit kind of retroactively.
We're speaking with Luke Metzger, the Executive Director of Environment Texas. You can give us a call and join the conversation at 713-440-8870.
Luke, let me ask you this. For those who are proposing this legislation, and I hate to put you in this position, but what are they saying are the true benefits of this, and why are they encouraging this kind of regulation from their point of view so we can fully understand the argument here?
Sure. Well, I think Micah was saying before, there is a lot of concern that's legitimate concern around loss of open space in the state. We are quickly losing a lot of the iconic countryside that Texas is known for, 1,000 acres every day. And, again, most of that loss is for residential housing, and oil and gas is also taking up a lot of space. But, solar does require some land. And so I think there's concern about loss of open space. There's also, you always hear the concern around loss of bird strikes with wind turbines, which is certainly a concern. But, again, if you put it in perspective, we lose less than 1 million birds, a year to impacts with wind turbines. That compares to collisions with tall buildings of 1 billion. 1,000 times more bird strikes from tall buildings. We're not talking about that. We're singling out renewables. And when you factor in the huge benefits to our wildlife from clean energy and reduction of the threat of climate change, it's overwhelmingly clear that the benefits to wildlife far outweigh any harm. And that's why you've got groups like the Audubon Society, National Wildlife Federation, and others who are opposing this bill, as they recognize that this would be a step backwards for wildlife.
Where do you find a happy medium in this, where you would be comfortable with what they want to do to regulate, but you want to do to keep it accessible and growing?
Right. We do need to find that balance, right? Because we do need clean energy to grow rapidly in order to, avoid some of the worst outcomes for the environment. But we do need to mitigate some of those impacts. And so I think the setbacks, in this legislation are appropriate. I think landowner notification. I think we could be doing far more to adopt best practices on solar farms and wind turbines, including incorporating agriculture, what's called agrivoltaics, where you can still grow crops, or you have sheep or other livestock on the property. Steps to reduce kind of runoff pollution, so we can make sure that when we're developing the solar farm, we're not compacting the soil so much that you have a lot of runoff pollution when it rains. So there's a lot of important steps we could be taking here. Unfortunately, this bill instead just takes a sledgehammer to it and says, rather than let's find a balanced approach to helping clean energy move forward while mitigating impacts, this just basically shuts down the industry entirely.
So, Luke, the United States Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright, has rolled back some of the energy policy within renewables. Do you feel like at a state level we will be seeing any of those direct impacts from that?
Well, a lot of renewable energy development in other states is on public land, which is where the federal government obviously has a lot of influence over. Here in Texas, the vast majority of renewable energy development and energy development of all sorts is on private land. And so those federal actions have less impact. You did see early on the Trump administration adopt some policies to make it tougher from a permitting standpoint, but those policies have been lifted. I think the bigger concern from the federal level will be some of the tax credits that the Congress will have to decide on whether to continue that promote clean energy. And the good news is that there's bipartisan support for maintaining a lot of those tax credits, including in the very narrowly held House of Representatives. So I think we have a good shot of preserving some of those tax incentives that include everything from the utility scale into renewables, but also tax incentives that we homeowners can enjoy, include getting discounts on solar panels or more efficient windows and things like that help us all save energy in our homes, saving money on our electric bills while also helping the environment.
As always, we're interested in what you have to say, your questions, concerns, and thoughts on this topic at 713-440-8870. On the phone with us right now, we have Brian from Huntsville. Brian, what's on your mind today?
Good morning.
Good morning.
We recently signed a contract. It was before any of this went into the legislature, with Apex Energy to put wind turbine development on my wife's property in Leon County.
Okay.
And so we've spent a year researching it, and we've spent time with attorneys to go over the contract, the development contract, and a lot of the concerns that are in this Bill 819 are addressed in the contract from the developer to the landowner.
So your point being that the bill is helpful or not helpful?
No, it's not helpful. And let me tell you another thing. When you've got the Vice President of the United States going around trying to buy up distressed agricultural properties through his acre exchange program, this funding from these contracts can keep from losing the land.
Sure.
Sure.
Brian,
my wife told me when we signed it, she said, "This is our nursing home money."
Yeah.
Right.
Brian, I'm going to hold you right there. Luke, your reaction to Brian's call.
Yeah, well, I think two things. So, one, Brian's point is important to remember about how many people are benefiting. Landowners who lease their lands, to wind and solar, getting significant revenue, in many cases allowing them to keep that land, and rather than selling it to a housing development, able to keep that land and use it, potentially for other purposes. But then his main point Brian made is that this legislation is duplicative in a lot of ways. And for example, it would assess a new cleanup or decommissioning fee that companies have to pay at the end of a solar farm or wind farms, 25-year, life, for example. The problem is the legislature already required that. Their legislation in 2019 and 2021 already required wind and solar companies to pay 100% of the decommissioning costs. And so now this would add an extra fee on top of that, and just, penalizing renewable energy when they're already required to do some of these things.
Let me ask this. At the end of the day, which I think probably most people care about when we talk about energy, is what's this going to do to my bills? Does this, at the end of the day, increase cost of power in this state or decrease it? And what is the benefits to having it when it comes to our bill?
Well, the Texas Association of Business just released a report last week that estimated that if bills like SB 819 pass, it'll increase our electric bills on average about 10%. So this is going to cost ratepayers money. And the reason why is that wind and solar are very cheap now. The prices have come down, 70 to 90% in the last decade. And so the installation cost is cheap, and then the fuel is free. The fuel of the sun and the fuel of the wind is free. And the way the electric market works here in Texas with ERCOT is that the cheapest energy goes first. They bid against each other, and whoever's cheapest gets to put onto the grid first. And so if we cut back, wind and solar, that means more expensive gas or other energy sources will instead fill the void, which will increase our electric bills.
We're speaking with Luke Metzger, the Executive Director of Environment Texas. You can give us a call at 713-440-8870 to join the conversation.
Well, Luke, I have a question. You mentioned the disposal of at the end of the life of, say, a wind turbine. That's the only objections I've ever heard to wind energy, because I think wind and solar energy are perfect. Like you say, they're free, and I think we should support them. But we want proper disposal after the life of these things, because that fiberglass doesn't break down very easily, and it ends up in landfills and basically getting dumped. So I think you more than anyone would know the answer to my question. Is this part of the problem being taken care of already?
Well, more needs to be done. And the good news is that there's other legislation by Representative Stan Lambert that would better address some of the end of life and the recycling of those wind turbines and solar panels, because we do need to do more on that. Right now, too much is getting landfilled. And so we have a great opportunity to take advantage of a lot of the components in a solar panel, for example, or in a wind blade, and reuse it or repurpose it. And so there are more needs to be done on that front. There are good bills to do that. Unfortunately, SB 819 again, doesn't actually address this, and instead just kind of stops the industry from moving forward.
And it doesn't. It's okay to frack, right? I mean, you don't have to have any permits or regulations to put an oil well in your front yard.
Right. You don't, certainly this bill would kind of create a whole separate set of permitting that oil and gas does not have to comply with, or natural gas power plants or nuclear power plants. And so, if that's why I think it's disingenuous to claim that this bill is intended to help the environment. If they want to, help with the environment, they would address and some of the biggest concerns, including the waste pits from fracking or the air pollution or the climate. But instead, they're ignoring all of the enormous harm to the environment from fossil fuels or other energy sources and just singling out the clean energy that we have. It doesn't make any sense.
Right. Yeah. Another question for you. If I understand this correctly, many counties get crucial tax revenue from wind and solar leases. So if SB 819 is adopted, how would that impact like school districts and county budgets?
Well, 2 years ago, the legislature kicked wind and solar energy out of the school tax credit program, what was called the Chapter 313 program. And now this bill would kick renewables out of the county tax abatement program called Chapter 312. And so that would, again, take away a revenue source that helps make wind and solar energy viable and profitable, and also would remove a tool, from counties to be able to attract, new energy in manufacturing facilities in their counties. Unlike, say, along the Gulf Coast where you have tons of new manufacturing coming in, you have, refineries, chemical plants, LNG terminals, et cetera. In a lot of these rural areas, there isn't any, economic development or new manufacturing coming in. It's, it's the wind, the solar, the batteries that are making up most of that. And so I think this is also just a, attack on counties and rural areas of the states that really rely on that tax revenue by attracting these companies with these deals.
Before we let you go, we're going to run back over to the phones at 713-440-8870. Lloyd from Northwest Houston is with us. Lloyd, what's on your mind?
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for taking my call.
No
I just
problem.
wanted to say that I see this as a part of the continuing effort by the Republican administration of Texas to continue to favor the oil and gas industry, where they generate healthy campaign donations. And they're basically serving their master by promoting oil and gas and doing everything they can to hinder renewable energy.
Thank you very much for that, Lloyd. I assume that that's a school of thought out there shared by many that are listening.
So, Luke, let me ask you, we don't have much time left, but let me ask you this. What can someone do that wants to either object to the bill or promote the bill? Either way. But if someone feels like they need to call the senator or someone, what should they do?
Well, the bill passed the Senate 22-9 last week. And so now it moves to the House of Representatives. And so you can contact your representative, particularly if your representative is on the House State Affairs Committee. That's going to be the key committee that considers the bill next. Those legislators will, and there's at least 3 for Houston that are on that committee.
So, like you said, the bill is now headed to the House for a vote. How likely is it that it will pass within the House?
Well, a similar version of the bill passed the Senate 2 years ago and died in the House. And so it's a different makeup of the House of Representatives today than it was 2 years ago. But we're hopeful and optimistic that we're able to stop this bill again in the House. And hopefully, we can stop just, full on attack on renewables and come together and find, real positive path forward to, again, mitigate the impacts to the environment while allowing clean energy to move forward.
Luke Metzger is the executive director of Environment Texas. Luke, thanks for joining us on Hello Houston.
It was great to be on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up on Hello Houston, we'll talk to the owner and operator of 610 Record Manufacturing. Stay with us. We'll be back.
Or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's Ernie Manouse, Celeste Díaz Schurman, and Frank Billingsley.
Support comes from Signify Business Cash by Wells Fargo. With this business credit card, cardholders can earn rewards on business purchases with no caps or categories to track. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/signify. Terms apply.
You count on Houston Public Media because you understand how important a free press is to a healthy society.
We're not chasing ratings. We're not owned by a corporation. We're here to inform you with facts, context, and clarity.
When you give today, you're helping protect journalism that serves you, not a political agenda or a bottom line.
Support this public service now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
Support comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, committed to strengthening the state's workforce and its communities through safety and wellness grants and education initiatives. More at texasmutual.com/community impact. Support comes from Elmore, communicating with clarity and inspiration, collaborating with executive leadership to create expert internal and external communication strategy. Elmore, listen, clarify, communicate. More at elmorepr.com.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Houston Community College, with 8 areas of study, offering students over 90 programs and career choices, online or in person. Sign up information and more at hccs.edu.
Support comes from Classical Theater Company, presenting Anton Chekhov's classic early modern drama, Three Sisters. Performances through April 26th at the Deluxe Theater. Ticket info at classicaltheater.org. Support comes from LaPorte CPAs and Business Advisors, an independent accounting and business advisory firm serving clients for more than 75 years, with 190 employees across offices in Houston, New Orleans, and other locations. More information at laporte.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. Call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org to get your comment in on today's topics. Now back to Ernie Manouse, Celeste Díaz Schurman, and Frank Billingsley.
All right, hello Houston, welcome back. I'm with Celeste Díaz Schurman and Ernie Manouse, and I tell you, I'm really excited about our next guest. So I don't know, for my birthday last June, I begged Kevin for a record player.
I remember that.
I was like, please, and he's like, there's nowhere to put a record player in this house. I'm like, there is a place, and we found a place. And anyway, he said no, but then he surprised me and got me one.
Aww.
So now I can play records, and guess what? Now I can buy more records. In recent years, vinyl records have seen this huge resurgence in popularity, becoming the music industry's most popular physical media format. I did not know that, but there you have it. Did you know that there are only 4 record manufacturing plants in Texas, and only one of them is in Houston?
I'm not surprised.
There you go. It's located in the East End. It's called 610 Record Manufacturing. It opened in June of last year, probably for my birthday, and is the city's first record manufacturer in 30 years. And with us now is the owner and operator, Joel Hoyle. Welcome to Hello Houston, Joel.
Thank you.
We're glad you're here. So, all right, you grew up with vinyl, I'm sure, like we all did. So when did you say, I want to sell, I want to do this, I want to operate and sell it?
I guess 2018, I quit my corporate day job and decided, my wife and I actually decided this is our one chance to go for it.
Nice. So she supported you in this move.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right,
she gave me the best advice ever. If we're going to open a business, it needs to be something you love, because when it's stressful and crazy, it'd be a lot easier to sleep at night.
She's a good lady.
She's a genius.
What she's talking about.
Manufacturing, though. So when I think of manufacturing, are you actually making the vinyl records?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we're basically like the high-powered waffle iron.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Help people understand the difference between the record label companies and manufacturing.
Yes. Well, the term actually record label for the company that markets and promotes records actually came from the actual label on a record. So that's basically the record label, the record company is just who does that. They go out and sign artists, they market and promote them. For us, we are the manufacturer.
So they call you and say, hey, we want...
you need to press these.
Exactly. We need so many records of this particular title.
And then who's going to sell it? Are you going to sell it? Or
No, we actually are not retail at all whatsoever. So we're strictly like business to business, or wholesale.
So when you're manufacturing these, where do you send them out to? Where who's your highest person that buys them?
So our customers are record labels, managers, and independent artists themselves. And basically, wherever they tell us to ship their records, we send them to them. But from there, the responsibility sales-wise to the public, that's their world, not ours. So.
And I'm not asking you your business, but how much does a record cost these days? If I went out to I go to these shops that are all resale of records, but a new album, how much would it cost these days?
Full retail, you're looking at about an average about $40.
Really?
Yeah, it's expensive. Even on the resale market, we were talking about having record collections or whatever, but back in the day, you could go to any resale shop and get a few handfuls of records for $10 or $20.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Not anymore.
People say, and I'm not an expert at all, but they say that vinyl just sounds better.
Yeah, let's talk fidelity here. What
Yeah,
is
yeah.
it about vinyl that gives you that sound?
It's basically the closest. It's the format that gets the closest to the natural frequency range of the human ear.
Really?
Interesting.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of people would describe the sound as being warm, and because it genuinely is comforting and pleasing to our ears.
But so many of us hear records, and the first sound you hear is.
Yeah, I hate that noise.
It's what you think of when you think of vinyl.
Right.
Yeah,
that's very good.
Thank you. Got a lot of records.
Yeah, people love that noise. They romanticize it, but no.
But so are you saying? And I didn't grow up. I grew up in the CD era.
Yeah.
I barely even. I think I've maybe seen a vinyl. I see them at.
Our son didn't know what they were.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is so are today Sabrina Carpenter? Is she on vinyl?
Absolutely, 100%.
So is that what would you say is the most surprising thing that you've encountered since you've been in the manufacturing of vinyl? In manufacturing,
like as far as who's releasing records?
Yeah, what
no one. And the reason I say that is because if you're an artist of any size, whether you're Sabrina Carpenter all the way down to a local band down the street, the most important thing you want to be selling is a physical music product. You're going to make money off of that, and
that's true.
You're not making money off of streaming. Sabrina Carpenter may, but unless you're as popular as she is and has the money behind her that she does, you don't stand a chance to make any money in the streaming world. So for by far the majority of musical artists worldwide, selling records is the most profitable thing you can do outside of being
Do you have a statistic on the resurgence? I mean, how many records are we talking?
It's more than $1 billion a year industry just in this country alone.
Wow.
For new manufacturing?
Absolutely.
Wow.
And that's retail. And
so that means
depending on who you talk to, those numbers are untrue one direction or another.
But there are a lot of people out there buying. There are a lot of people buying record players. Then.
But people aren't buying CDs like they used to. So it's so
physical
interesting
media
that they
has
go
kind
to
of disappeared,
vinyl.
but they've come back to the OG of vinyl.
Yeah.
And also, they often say, an artist only makes their money now by touring and by their merchandising.
Yeah.
And so when you go and see them in concert to pick up the vinyl,
absolutely,
that's a great keepsake of an artist. And take you on a little Ernie story.
Okay.
So artist, Nana Muscuri, biggest selling female recording artist of all time. First album I bought of hers, used record store, 33 cents. 120 albums later, she's now in her 90s. She just released her most recent album, her Happy Birthday album. She released it digitally and back on vinyl again.
Absolutely.
And I bought it from Germany so I would have the vinyl of it. Yeah. I don't know if I'll ever play it, but just to have it.
Ernie, do you have a record player? We know that.
I do. I have
does.
one.
Y'all have a record player.
I was telling our guests right before we started that I had 5,000 albums at my height of collecting albums. Moves and stuff, I've dwindled down now. I've only got about 300 to 400 albums now that I keep. But I do love still the idea, the thought of having the album.
Absolutely. And the scenario you just described is very common. Streaming and vinyl go hand in hand.
Yeah.
A lot of people think that they're a clash with each other, but they're not. If it's when I was coming up, I'm assuming you all too maybe.
For sure.
Basically, the radio was the king, right?
Yeah.
So now it's streaming has basically replaced radio.
Yeah.
So when people are hearing something on streaming and they like it, they want to go support the artist. They go buy the record. And young people especially know that, which is why they're the largest demographic of people buying records.
I remember hearing back in the 80s when CDs were first coming out.
Yeah.
You got to be careful. The sound is going to fade over time. And now recently I've seen news stories that are saying CDs you have from the old days, they're starting to lose the sound.
Yep.
It's going away.
Wow. Yeah, they literally are falling apart.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually old enough to remember when they called it the transition in music retail, when CDs were coming on, pushing out vinyl.
Right.
And a lot of the record labels were sending out reps to give us these demonstrations about CDs being indestructible. And there's this classic video that used to be sent around where the guy would grab a CD and like throw it on the floor and would pick it up like, it still plays.
Yeah.
You know,
Boy, but one little scratch could throw
I have
you
a
off.
story.
Exactly. They didn't mention the
about my CD. I remember begging for a Walkman, but I remember thinking it was going to be so cool, but you had to hold it a certain way with my CD because it would just bounce if you were walking.
Absolutely. You know, sales is sales, right? You know.
Yeah. So quick question for you. You were saying on average a vinyl would cost about $40. How much does it cost to actually make it?
For our customer, it depends on the quantity, just like anything else. So our minimum is 100 records. And like fully packaged, retail ready, that will cost you about $17 a record.
Wow. Still the problem of the amount of length of how much can be recorded on one side of a vinyl disc, because the more you want to put on, the less quality in the sound. Is
Absolutely,
that right?
yeah. So basically, the longer the length of the side of the record, the quieter it's going to be. And the reason is just the physics of the record itself and the frequency. So if you cram in too much too loud, the needle will literally pop out of the groove of the record.
I have a quick
especially
question.
on the low end.
We just have a little bit left here.
Sure.
So I got a single player record player, right? Single album. And everybody said, oh, you should have gotten where you can stack 5 or 6 records and it would play, after it's done. But that's probably not smart.
Yeah, I actually haven't seen one of those in a very long time. So if there's a new one of those, then I guess that's exciting because people are really getting into it that deep. But I don't recommend it personally. But
Joel, thank you so much for being here.
Joel Hoyle is the owner and operator of 610 Record Manufacturing. Coming up on Hello Houston, we'll discuss artificial intelligence with Josh Kaisen, managing director of the Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence Institute at U of H, and have a pop culture check-in with Nerdtropolis owner. This is Hello Houston on News 88.7.
Stay tuned. There's more Hello Houston on the way with Ernie Manouse, Celeste Díaz Schurman, and Frank Billingsley. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at houstonpublicmedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Support comes from Novotny & Company, offering commercial and residential property tax protests for 38 years. The deadline to file a protest is May 21st in Harris County. Info and online filing at novotnycompany.com.
Showers and thunderstorms still likely today, with our high getting up to near 81. 68, and this is your NPR station, KUHF Houston. News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. It's 12 o'clock.
Just ahead on this hour of Hello Houston, we continue exploring the legacy of Pope Francis following his passing this morning at the age of 88. I'm Frank Billingsley.
And I'm Celeste Díaz Schurman. We'll also discuss the fact and fiction of artificial intelligence with Josh Kaisen, the managing director of the Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence Institute at the University of Houston.
And I'm Ernie Manouse. Plus, the Houston Parks Department joins us to share insight on Houston's hidden park treasures.
Also, we want to know your thoughts, so call us at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel. Just go to houstonpublicmedia.org and click the big orange banner.
Hello Houston continues right after the news from NPR and News 88.7.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Windsor Johnston. NPR has learned that the White House has begun the process of looking for a new Secretary of Defense. That's according to an official who was not authorized to speak publicly. This comes as Secretary Pete Hegseth continues to find himself surrounded in controversy. Hegseth apparently shared details with his wife and brother just minutes after being updated on the Yemen strikes by a senior U.S. military official. That was in a second signal chat on his personal phone ahead of strikes in Yemen last month. The Eiffel Tower will go dark in Paris tonight as the people of France remember Pope Francis, who died today at the age of 88. As NPR's Eleanor Beardsley reports, tributes are pouring in from across the country.
As Easter tourists crowded the cathedral's plaza, Notre Dame toned the death knell for Pope Francis 88 times Monday morning. French President Emmanuel Macron said Pope Francis was at the side of the most vulnerable and fragile. He wanted the church to bring joy and hope to the poorest, said Macron. France is often referred to as the eldest daughter of the Catholic Church. King Clovis of the Franks was the first European monarch to convert to Catholicism in the year 496. Eleanor Beardsley, NPR News, Paris.
Crowds gathered in St. Peter's Square in Vatican City today shortly after hearing of the Pope's passing. NPR's Sylvia Poggioli reports Francis spent his final days in service of the Church.
The reason I say it's stunning because in the last few days, Pope Francis had surprised many people by coming out, even though he was convalescing, but he made several appearances, surprise appearances, many of them. And just yesterday, just before the Easter Mass was celebrated in St. Peter's Square, he said just a few words, but the message to the city and the world, as it's known on Easter Day, was read out, and it was an extremely forceful one.
That's NPR's Sylvia Poggioli reporting from Rome. Markets are down sharply today on Wall Street as investors brace for some big tech earnings reports this week. NPR's Scott Horsley reports on the potential fallout for financial markets.
Tesla is due to report earnings tomorrow. The electric car maker has already announced a 13% drop in first quarter auto sales. Google's parent company is set to report earnings on Thursday. The search engine giant was hit last week with a second adverse court ruling when a judge found it built an illegal monopoly in its web advertising business. With President Trump's trade war sowing doubts about the U.S. economy, some investors are putting their bets on Europe and Asia. Billions of dollars flowed out of U.S. stock funds last week, while funds in Europe and Asia were attracting new money. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
On Wall Street, the Dow was down 1,100 points. This is NPR.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Gabrielle Dawkins. A flood advisory is in place for another 15 minutes. Janice Maldonado is a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and she gives an outlook.
All these areas south of I-10 may see the highest precipitation chances, highest rain and storm chances for the rest of the day. So once this boundary moves along the coast, rain chances will diminish by late this afternoon, early evening.
The Trump administration's 10% tariffs on Canadian and Mexican crude oil imports are having little effect on Houston area refineries so far. News 88.7's government reporter Andrew Schneider says that's in part because crude oil prices have fallen across the globe in anticipation of a recession.
The tariffs on imported crude and falling crude prices across the globe are balancing out in terms of their effects on refineries and prices at the pump. But Ed Hers, an energy economist at the University of Houston, warns that a recession is likely to hit the region by summer at the latest.
The Port of Houston is going to take a hit not only in terms of inbound traffic, but also in terms of outbound traffic. Investment in warehousing, investment in travel. Is going to diminish due to the uncertainty, not just to the tariffs, but due to the layoffs that are going to be coming here shortly.
Hers says that slower economic activity will hold down gasoline prices despite the tariffs. I'm Andrew Schneider, News 88.7.
And the Houston Rockets lost the opening game of their playoff run last night to the Golden State Warriors. 95-85, the final in that one. Jeff Balk is a writer for the Houston Press and joined Houston Matters this morning. He says the entire offense was off all night long.
It was just painful to watch missed shot after missed shot after missed shot. And, you know, when that happens and when you only shoot 6 of 29 from the three-point line as a unit, it's just tough to make up for that against a team like Golden State.
The Rockets claim the number 2 seed in this year's Western Conference. I'm Gabrielle Dawkins, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher is committed to helping clients stay on track to reach their financial goals and enjoy a comfortable retirement. FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
From Houston Public Media and News 88.7, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manouse, Celeste Díaz Schurman, and Frank Billingsley.
What are you laughing at?
Ernie.
Hello, Houston.
Hello,
We're
Houston.
back again. It's the noon hour, and not only are we on your radios, we are on YouTube. We have a podcast. We don't talk about that enough. If you have friends that can't listen to the show while it's happening, or you want to hear it again, or you missed it one day, not only do we release the entire show as a podcast, we also have a commuter cut, which is a 40-minute version of today's show, usually available by about 3 o'clock. So for your commute home or your friends and family's commutes, let them know. Wherever you get your podcast, you can get the Hello Houston podcast.
Wherever you get your podcast.
That's right. And the other
we're going to come out on vinyl soon, too.
The other thing is on YouTube, if there was a segment that you might have missed or you really liked, we do have specific segments that you can go back and rewatch, and we just have that.
We're going to live forever.
We're
everywhere.
Forever.
We're everywhere.
Oh, okay. Quick story. So the guy who
Story
wrote
time.
Communion, the book about, and this was out in the 80s probably, a book about connecting with aliens. And I interviewed him because he claimed he had had a conversation with an alien. So afterwards he said to me, you're very popular with them.
Oh, Lord.
And I was like, with
Aye.
who? And he was like, with my friends. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, radio sound never ends. And so they're hearing your shows out there.
Yep.
Aye.
So if you're an alien listening right now out beyond where
Aye,
Blue
aye,
Origin went,
aye.
give us a call or connect with us however
There
you
was
do.
a theory that they would have some kind of development happen where you could listen to Abraham Lincoln actually give the Gettysburg Address because it's
The
still out.
sound
The
still
sound
exists.
is still out there somewhere.
Fascinating. You know what else is fascinating? We made it through Easter pretty dry, but it's looking kind of wet out there.
It's gonna rain every day. It looks like, especially on Wednesday. But yeah, we had some pretty good storms this morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
I mean, if you have one of those dogs, I bet that dog was not happy.
Those yippy dogs when it storms.
Or gets scared and cuddles up. And then, of course, you got to let them out on the wet ground to go to the bathroom and got to deal with that.
Well, I don't have one of those dogs, but I do have 2 kids, and they were scared.
Yeah.
Do you let them go out in the yard and they get in the mud too?
Just Philip.
It's still coming down pretty good right at the coast, especially Brazoria and Matagorda County, so be careful.
Well, also to be careful about is one day we may well be replaced by AI. We're going to talk about the world of AI, fact and fiction, coming up on the show in just a bit. But Celeste is going to lead us off with some of the top stories of the day, the biggest story globally right now.
That's right. We've been remembering Pope Francis, who died on Easter Monday this morning at the age of 88. He was the first non-European head of the Roman Catholic Church in over 1,000 years, and I find that fascinating. And was one of the most popular popes in decades. He was elected to his post in 2013 and cast an image of humility during years of strain and change within his church and worldwide, and there is quite the legacy he leaves behind. Joining us now is Dr. Craig Considine, is an award-winning senior lecturer in sociology at Rice University, where he has served since 2015. He is known for his contributions to interfaith dialogue and his acclaimed scholarly works, including his latest book, Beyond Dialogue, Building Bonds Between Christians and Muslims. Dr. Considine, welcome to Hello Houston.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's good to have you with us, especially at a time like this, to help us put into perspective the papacy of Francis. What I'm wondering is there too much already romanticism happening about him, or does he live up to this legacy we are remembering?
Well, I certainly think that Pope Francis, more than any other pope in recent memory, tried to do as much for humanity as possible. Now, we know with national politics and international dynamics, sometimes popes can't get their, policies or their ideas or their mission forward, but it was never through lack of trying with Pope Francis. So if the media is romanticizing him and saying, well, he said all this and, he went here and went there, I mean, that's all good, but the Pope isn't the ruler of the world also. So he's obviously limited in what he can implement and what he can enact. But I hope the media is not being too hard on him. I haven't really had a chance to follow the media.
No, it doesn't seem as though they have, which is quite refreshing. I am curious. So we talked about this in our first hour among us hosts here, is that we are seeming to move globally into a more conservative place to be right now. Yet through Pope Francis, it seemed as though the Catholic Church, if not becoming more liberal, at least was opening up to more ideas. Do you think in the conclave that is coming, they will continue on Pope Francis's path, or because of the way the world seems to be sliding, might they step more conservatively back?
This is the million-dollar question. Now, conclaves are notoriously and historically quite difficult to predict, mainly due to the secrecy of the College of Cardinals. I will say this. If Cardinal Tagle from the Philippines becomes the next pope, which a lot of experts are saying it's possible, he's considered the Asian Francis. So the progressive focus on the environment, pro-LGBTQ, pro-same-sex marriage, a lot of these positions would continue. And what's interesting also, of the about 140 cardinals who can vote, so anyone under the age of 80, if you're a cardinal, you can vote. Not all cardinals can. A lot of those cardinals were appointed by Francis. So some experts are saying that there's a pretty good chance that it could continue on this way. Now, we also, need to look at the whole lay of the political land. There is Cardinal Erdo, who grew up in Hungary. He's considered a more kind of centrist, more moderate candidate. And then on the conservative side, we have Cardinal Sarah from Guinea in Africa. And while he is black, which would be a massive story for the Vatican in terms of its history, he's very conservative on doctrinal and social issues. So we shall see. That's just a little feel for the political landscape. But we shall see if Cardinal Tagle can get to the papacy and continue Francis's progressive legacy.
But I guess I'm kind of thinking along the lines, if I'm not mistaken, in my history after John Paul II, they moved away from his liberal movements more to a more conservative. So I wonder if a similar thing might happen this time. But you bring up an interesting point with the number of appointees from this pope that could actually continue his mission forward.
Yeah, we'll see. What's interesting, I was listening this morning to a couple radio shows, and the number of Catholics in this country is going up, and it's going up amongst young people. And I wonder if that has to do with Pope Francis focusing on issues that young people particularly care about. So environment, LGBTQ, same-sex marriage, and so on and so forth. So you bet that the College of Cardinals are looking at where the church is. What do we need for the church to succeed, to excel? Should we be continuing on this path, this progressive path, which might be more appealing to the youth in the United States or not? So, again, these things are notoriously difficult to predict, but we shall find out soon enough.
Do you think, sir, that there is any chance that women would ever enter the priesthood under the Catholic Church?
Great question. I hope so, to be honest. I'm a married man myself, and I'm Catholic, and it's always really bothered me that even I can't serve as well because I'm married. I mean, I can only go so high as a deacon, but I think the Catholic Church, this might sound heretical to some, but we need the best Catholics in positions of leadership and power as possible. As many as possible. And if it's a woman or if it's a man or whatever it might be, that's what the church needs. We need the best and the brightest. And if that person happens to be a woman, great. Now, do I see things changing drastically here in the next couple of years? I think a lot of this will be determined by who the next pope is. If it's going to be Cardinal Sarah from Guinea, I think there's probably no chance. If it's Cardinal Tagle from the Philippines, again, the Asian Francis, the progressive, he might try, but he still might hit a bunch of walls along the way.
Yeah. Over the next few days, we will be hearing a lot about the conclave and about the College of Cardinals. Many people are familiar with the film Conclave and disregarding the ending of the film and the actual plot storyline within it. The process that we see in the film, how realistic is that? How true to life is it?
It's pretty accurate, to be honest. I think the one thing that they didn't do is the private meetings that will be held soon between members of the College of Cardinals. So them meeting individually with one another, politicking, different alliances start forming. Mm-hmm. We didn't really see too much of that in the film. What we did see in the film is the run up to the actual conclave, where they're all inside the Vatican. The doors are locked. That all happens. That's very real. With conclave, the voting procedure that was shown in the movie is 100% accurate, where there's literally paper ballots. The dean of the College of Cardinals calls on each cardinal to go drop their little piece of paper that they wrote their nominee on and drop it into the box, a little box, and it's all tallied right there. Mm-hmm. Also, Conclave, the movie, had the picture of or the video of the white smoke. So when the white smoke goes up, that's when the College from the Vatican, St. Peter's, that's when the College of Cardinals has elected their next leader. So pretty accurate, to be honest.
So, Dr. Considine, you mentioned, how the potential successors coming up, but what will happen next? Is there usually a typical timeline of when the next pope will be announced?
So, mourning is the number one priority.
Correct.
This point in time, and then we do move to this private deliberative stage where the College of Cardinals are meeting independently. This is typically it goes for about 10 days, and then the conclave is then summoned typically 12, 15 days after, depending on how long the mourning is going to be. And then in regards to the actual voting, how long that's going to take, that can be 1 day, which is unlikely. It can be 3 days, which I believe was the case with Pope Francis, or it could be longer. For the sake of the church, I hope it's not too messy. I hope that they can reach a relatively smooth consensus soon so the church can move forward at a very critical time, because it's quite divided at the moment.
Mm-hmm. We want to remind you can join the conversation by giving us a call at 713-440-8870. We are remembering the life and legacy of the Pope.
I have to admit, this is Frank Billingsley, sir. I have to admit, I didn't see Conclave, but I bet there will be.
I didn't either.
I bet there will be a big download, because Kevin, my husband, is Catholic. Mm-hmm. So I know a lot about this stuff, kind of, right. Through him. But I'm going to certainly get it on Netflix or wherever it is, and I bet there will be this week a big download of that movie.
Definitely.
Now, the other thing I think about is sainthood. Is this something that this is a conversation will be beginning about potentially making the Pope a saint?
Good question. It's funny, he's named after St. Francis of Assisi, who did incredible work himself with Christian-Muslim relations. But the church has a whole formal process on how one can become sainted. And its primary objective in deliberating this is whether Pope Francis has been recorded or known to have potentially created a miracle or some type of divine intervention in someone's life. So these examples will perhaps roll out over the years, but then it takes years and years for the church to evaluate the evidence. They have to do the interviews. They have to look at a lot of different things. So if it were to happen, it wouldn't happen for quite some time.
We've been talking an awful lot about the policy and the politics around it and all. I want to go back to the Pope before we run out of time a little bit and talk about what you see as the things that he will be remembered for in his legacy.
So 2 primary things. Number 1, concern for the periphery of humanity, the people on the periphery, the downtrodden, the impoverished, those suffering, those that do not have the means to thrive and succeed in our world. Pope Francis did more for those forgotten people, not the centers of Catholicism in L.A. and Rome and Paris and so on, more for the people who are left behind. That's number one. And we see this also with his first trip outside of the Vatican back in 2013. You know, he didn't go to D.C. to meet the president. He didn't go to China to meet with Xi or any of this. He went to Lampedusa in southern Italy, off the coast of southern Italy, which was the epicenter of the refugee crisis. And it was there that he gave, I think, the second key element, in addition to the periphery of his papacy, which was the culture of encounter. He was encouraging not just Catholics, but people of all walks of life to get to know one another, to not be divisive, to break bread with one another, to understand one another. And he extended this culture of encounter not just to refugees. He brought it to Christian and Muslim relations. And when he visited in 2019 the UAE, he was the first pope ever to step foot on the Arabian Peninsula. And it was there he signed a document on human fraternity, which is arguably the second biggest Christian-Muslim relations document that the Vatican has ever put out. 1965 Nostra Aetate is the big one. Pope Francis signs a document on human fraternity. So his trips throughout the world, whether it's Lampedusa or Abu Dhabi in the UAE or Mosul in Iraq, those trips capture what he was really all about. Making sure that those who are forgotten are not forgotten.
A quick question: when you talk about that message, we did see that there was, to move back into the political realm, J.D. Vance's visit to the Vatican. Initially, the Pope had not met with him, but he sent an emissary to pass a message on to him about, as we understand it, an acceptance and an understanding of all people and a fairness. But then we do know from reporting that the Pope did meet with J.D. Vance yesterday. Do we have any idea what happened in that meeting at this point?
I have not heard anything, just a couple of sound bites of what J.D. and the Pope spoke about. Honestly, I think it was pretty basic. I think the Pope wasn't in great shape, to be honest. But let me say this. And this is really important, and a lot of people kind of overlook this. Pope Francis gave a couple, I think it was 3 different presents for J.D. Vance to bring home to his children. And I think little things like that Pope Francis did, it touched people. You know, he's thinking about the youth. He's thinking about J.D. Vance's family, even though he may disagree with J.D. Vance on immigration. He's still thinking about them. He's still connecting it back to humanity. And I think those little things are what touched people. You know, even another case, too, another big lasting image in my brain is when he welcomed people to the Vatican who were African migrants. And Pope Francis got down on his knees and he washed their feet. You know, just as we have in different periods in Jesus's life, you know. That is the ultimate act of humbleness, and that's what he was communicating to his people. Even though he's at the top of the charts of the Catholic Church with all the wealth and power in the world, here's the leader on his knee, basically respecting the humanity of another man. And I thought that was very symbolic.
I heard the Pope referred to today by someone in the media as the parish priest to the world, as opposed to a pope who stayed in the Vatican.
That's exactly right. And this goes back to the periphery thing, you know.
Yeah.
He wanted to bring that periphery, that local, everyday community or struggle, whatever you might want to call it, to the center of the church. And live in the church that way, rather than live in the church internally, politically, with big power and all this stuff. He was very humble, very, very humble, much more so than previous popes. And we shall see where the College of Cardinals goes here. Like I said, it's notoriously difficult to predict, but I hope, regardless of who gets in there, the culture of encounter continues and care for those who are marginalized and on the periphery of society also continues.
Well, this has been fascinating. And, sir, I hope you'll come back when we do have a new pope and tell us what you think about that person and what we can maybe expect from that person.
I would love that. I'll be sure to do my homework for that session.
Okay, yeah.
Craig, thank you.
Dr. Craig Considine is the senior lecturer in sociology at Rice University. Coming up on Hello Houston, well, we're going to talk all about the world of artificial intelligence. And we are also taking your calls on any of today's topics at 713-440-8870. This is Hello Houston on News 88.7.
Houston Public Media is rooted in our community. We show up at school board meetings, city council votes, and neighborhood events.
That's how you stay informed about what's happening around you through deep local reporting that brings clarity and insight.
Your support powers this public service, so Greater Houston stays informed, connected, and safe.
Support local journalism right now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
Support comes from Signify Business Cash by Wells Fargo. With this business credit card, cardholders can earn rewards on business purchases with no caps or categories to track. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/signify. Terms apply. Support comes from the School of Science and Technology, a public charter school providing academic development through college preparatory and STEM-based learning models. Grades pre-K through 12, enrollment open now. Details at sstschools.org.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from Rice University's Master of Liberal Studies, a flexible degree taught by Rice faculty that balances life and learning for working adults. More at gls.rice.edu.
Support comes from GenPro, a Houston-based home generator service providing power to homes during unexpected outages, helping with connectivity and productivity. More information is available at genpro.com.
At All Things Considered, what unites all our conversations is curiosity.
Is he a good hugger?
Whether we're speaking to an aid worker,
What would you want them to know or understand about what you all are dealing with?
a scientist,
But what's in it for the Dolphins?
or a foreign leader.
If I may, I will ask the questions.
Skills by the Israeli
I will
police.
ask the questions.
Questions and answers every day on All Things Considered from NPR News.
All Things Considered, weekdays beginning at 3 p.m. on News 88.7.
And now back to Hello Houston. To share your thoughts on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's Ernie Manouse, Celeste Díaz Schurman, and Frank Billingsley.
And we are back again. I found that conversation on the Pope and what's going to happen, the process, and the candidates that could be candidates. It feels so weird to talk about a religious leader as candidates and political, but it is.
And I use the word successor. I should have just said the next pope.
Yeah.
You know,
he is.
I want to be as
successor.
respectful as possible.
I think in the Catholic tradition, it is a successor because they are all seen to be spiritually descendant from Peter. So each one carries the mantle of Peter. It's a fascinating story, and I'm sure we'll learn a lot more over the next few weeks as this process plays out, and we'll cover it here on the show. But Celeste, you've got our next guest with us.
I do. You may have noticed a trend online over the last few weeks. One we have actively participated in. People posting AI-generated images of themselves as action figures or characters out of a Studio Ghibli movie. This is a seemingly harmless use of artificial intelligence. Though the technology behind AI isn't new, its perception amongst the public is constantly changing. Is it the last step towards technological supremacy, one that will take everyone's jobs and maybe destroy mankind in the process? That's what certain movies will make you think if you sit there and you watch and look at this. AI is used also in all sorts of industries, including health, science, business, and economics. Artificial intelligence is even encroaching on art. Take those images we were talking about earlier, for example. Another example, filmmakers using AI to make Adrian Brody's Hungarian accent more accurate in the film The Brutalist. So what can and can't artificial intelligence do? What could it potentially do? And what does the media and public perception get wrong about AI? To discuss, we welcome Josh Kaisen, a managing director of the Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence Institute at the University of Houston. Josh, welcome to Hello Houston.
Hello.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a long trip over from my office. So.
Because we are on the campus also.
So how long has the technology behind artificial intelligence existed?
Well, so there's two answers to this question. The true answer to that would surprise you a bit because it's been around for about 80 years. Since 1943 was when the true AI was conceptualized. The thing that we're talking about now, the tools you mentioned, the art creation softwares, the voice correction patterns, that's all based on this technology that was developed in 2017. So that's about, I don't like to tell you that number anymore, 8 years old now. And it's become widely available through software like ChatGPT. And it's just gotten better and better and better the more people have used it because the underlying technology is improved by user feedback.
But Josh, how is it different than just a Google search on something, just compiling results that are already out there? What is different that makes AI even a threat to a lot of people, and that we weren't worried when we can get all the information just by Googling it ourselves? Isn't it just a program that's doing that step for us?
It's actually very similar to a Google search, the underlying technology. So what it's interacting with is understanding the characters you're developing and getting that to the content you're interested in. Now it has the power to customize that because in 2017, this technology that was developed called transformers basically made it so the computer can understand the context of any words you put it in there. In any language you have articles like the, them, their. And for the longest time, machines just couldn't interpret these articles. So they can't digest almost any human language sentence because they have these elements in there. So Google Search, they used tokens. They search for individual words, keywords, and basically connect it to the articles you had there. Now AI can break down, or not AI, but the underlying technology behind AI can break down those articles and say the in this sentence or they in this sentence refers to the individual at the beginning of the sentence, and it can actually directly answer your message. And beyond that, it can reply to you in natural human language because it's unlocked that potential as well with this step in understanding.
So a friend of mine, Tim Heller, Tim was he was chief meteorologist at KTRK, and now he's a weather coach. And he said AI will not replace your job as a weatherman, but the person that understands AI will replace your job as a weatherman. So what do you think? I've seen the European models, the AI runs. They're very good. Where do you think AI and weather are going to be going? Will we need a weathman?
We'll always need a weatherman.
As long as he has personality, right?
I just might project like a persona, a digital persona on him, like one of those characters you have. So AI is poised to basically have workers that work with it be much more efficient. You've heard this. Likely in the next few years, not only will workers that use AI become more efficient, but they'll become more qualitative, more effective in their jobs. The issue is you'll always need to have a human, at least the current trajectory.
At least currently.
Well, the current models work basically on doing tasks you give them very well. It can't really navigate a complex task and handle all these components without human direction. So it can take isolated tasks. It can do it extremely well. Newer models are even able to handle more and more complex tasks, but it's nowhere near the point in which a human can understand managing and breaking down a task flow to give to a machine individually.
We are talking AI with Josh from UH, and if you want to get in this conversation, I'm sure a lot of you have questions about AI and what it means and what it's going to do and is it really going to take over the world, give us a call at 713-440-8870. I say it in jest, is it going to take over the world? This technology already is taking over the world in so many industries, not in necessarily a bad way, but in a much more productive manner.
Yeah, and what I'd like to see start happening is in work, basically you use AI to replace the tasks you don't like doing. Reply to monotonous emails, have meetings.
Wait, I got to talk to you about how that works. Help me set that one up.
It's not too hard to do. I can show you offline. It also replace meetings. So meetings take up a lot of time. It's to synthesize all the information your teams have together. You can replace that if you have some technology that scans the work you're doing and then scans this for the whole team, puts together basically a report and emails it out to relevant stakeholders. This will free up a lot of efficiency. I guess maybe some people enjoy meetings. I said replace tasks you don't like doing, but I don't know anyone that likes meetings. So,
Josh, I've got to say, I'm going to put myself out there. I am a little bit of an AI alarmist. I've never used Chat GPT. I understand that there are so many functions in our every single day life that we use AI and it assists us. But I have a real issue with it within my own industry, within journalism, and looking at financial projections and things. And when Ernie said, is it going to take over? It already has taken over. So what do you think needs to happen in regards to regulation of AI?
Regulation?
If you aren't watching on YouTube, you did not see his eyes get big like, oh, there's a lot here.
It's a loaded question, that's for sure.
Yeah, I have a real problem with it.
So I think first you need to start with education, especially to the people that make regulatory choices, because people like yourself that don't actually interact with the machine to produce creative work are extremely valuable to improving this work. It's really good at putting together existing materials and basically molding styles together. As you mentioned, the Ghibli animations, it can do that because there's just so much content in that regard. It can't produce a new animation style that's not just an amalgam of existing styles. So
why not?
Well, that's how the machine works. It's basically a Google search for all of the information on the internet that exists. Not that ever will be. It can't create the new material. It's not trained in that capacity.
We in the creative mind just build upon what has happened before, the ideas and the influences from it. So if you put in 6 different anime styles and say to it, find in here what is most successful and then develop it into a new animation style, couldn't it do that?
It can synthesize that style. Let me give an analogy. So in physics, my first PhD, did all but dissertation.
My first PhD, I'm in already
physics.
over my head.
The easy one was physics.
I should clarify, I didn't finish the program. I got pretty far, though. I did everything but the dissertation. Just a lot of extra work. So in physics, we have this idea. It was coined by Stephen Hawking. Actually put together this nice synthesis of all the work of like the famous physicists on the shoulder of giants. It's called. It's how I basically got into physics. So he had this idea of saying some physicists are sages. They synthesize existing material to make kind of profound insights that advance the field a little bit because it's just putting together existing material. This would be something like Einstein, who put together the material from Gauss and Lorentz into special relativity, photoelectric effect, and whatnot. That advanced the field of physics, like 50 years. But then you also have magicians, people like Isaac Newton, that basically just out of nowhere come up with something brand new that no one really contemplated before. And that's what you need to go further. Newton, basically his work was not rivaled for about 200 years after he conceived of it. And even to this day, it's kind of core all the way up until I think probably like your 3rd or 4th year of grad school. You're still learning basically things that Newton had already done. Newton or Euler. Euler's a mathematician that did very similar stuff. The idea is to go further. You can't just keep drudging onto old content. This is, of course, how academics is kind of trained. We have to spend a lot of time researching old things, and this period becomes longer and longer and longer the more old things exist. We can't go further until we have people that can start thinking of new things. I think that the AI is a really, really nice platform to basically help us synthesize all that old work because it's a phenomenal stage. It can take all the existing material, and it can find new insights. It could produce work like Einstein could from existing material. It can't create new material, new ways of thinking. It can't break the norm, but it can give us a fantastic platform for training of new thinkers to break that norm, to go further.
It can't or it can't currently.
It can.
So it's only as smart as we are.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Because it still can't prove gravity, right?
Right now, physicists are having lots of debates on even our current laws of gravity.
We're going to bring Newton into the conversation.
Yes.
We have to talk about gravity. There was, I think I'm wrong on this now, but I think I heard that it could only know everything that happened before 2021, and it was still working on things that were happening now. Where did that come from?
That was the GPT version, the GPT-3.
Okay, so that's already old.
Yeah, the current version of Gemini, it has access up to 2024, but it also has access to a live web search, so you can get material that doesn't from
could
today.
tell you about the death of the Pope, for instance.
Right, but if a new book came out today, it wouldn't be able to write in that style of that new book because it hasn't digested that into its core.
And how fast can this thing digest?
to update it, it takes a lot of resources, a lot of retraining, and it takes millions to billions of dollars. So that quickness of digesting isn't something that's getting faster. It's just able to access new information from the internet and talk about it.
We are talking AI. And there's another thing, Josh, we're going to get to in a minute, because where you work is called the Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence Institute. I want to dig into that. If you've got questions and thoughts on AI and you want to share them right now with us, give us a call. This is the best person to talk to about it. 713-440-8870.
So, Josh, I'm going to throw a curveball out here because this just occurred to me. How could tariffs affect the development of AI globally?
Yeah, so I was invited to talk about the recent developments in Houston, the Apple and NVIDIA announcing plans to create platforms here. I didn't want to make a public statement on this because it's kind of unpredictable what will happen if those plans will continue. So certainly it will reduce the global development of AI. You could see that that trajectory lead to less coordination in like a Chinese language version of an AI model, of a generative AI model, and an English version of a generative AI model, so that they diverge and maybe they are better at different things. And this could be interesting to inform learning. This is the only implication I'll mention as a hard prediction.
Let me take you back then to what I just said a minute ago, Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence Institute. Humans there, and it's the center, obviously, from the title. Why is it that title? Why isn't it just the Artificial Intelligence Institute? What are you trying to say with that title?
So, as I mentioned, there's two kinds of AIs you would talk about. You could say traditional AI. These are things that have existed since the 40s. Things like automation, algorithms, regression, statistic models. They all fit in that realm of traditional AI. And you have generative AI models. Traditional AI models, that can lead to things like automation and production lines and operations management, and that can basically work on its own. Generative AI models can't work on their own. To really be effective, they need to work through a human that guides their tasks or assigns them tasks to do. So what we focus on studying in the business literature and the social sciences literature is the relationship between humans and AI rather than exclusively AI itself, the effect of AI alone on business. We're interested in the effect of humans interacting with AI and how that improves business processes.
The sci-fi fear of AI becoming its own entity independent of humans. Reality behind that.
There's almost no basis to the current technology we're talking about, the generative AI stuff.
So over there,
let me preface this.
Current.
So they've published a lot of papers recently. One I think came out last week in Science that basically showed that even the existing really powerful generative AI models, they're not thinking. They're just basically searching through their library and saying, this is the most probable word I would recommend in this sentence to response to this user. Also, you've seen in the past, I think about 6-7 months ago, a paper that showed that generative AI models, when they're trained on their own work to try and improve based on their own output, it breaks down. It just kind of produces nonsense. So it can't go further without creative thinkers that aren't really using the technology to advance the machine itself.
Go ahead.
Oh, I will say reinforcement learning, this is the other side of things. This is what won the Nobel Prize last year with Google DeepMind. This has the potential to go further, but that's not implemented. It's getting implemented quickly into the generative AI, but right now it's not working.
Has anyone come up with a way to check to see if AI is responsible for something? And an easy one is a term paper. Mm-hmm. So if somebody writes a term paper, can a teacher scan it and know instantly it was done by AI?
Well, methods to do that are one thing. Good methods to do that are another. So there are certainly claimed to be methods that do that. They're not good methods, I will say. They have been shown time and time again to be biased against different racial groups, against non-English speakers. And in this bias, basically, it's more likely to claim false positives for these groups. So if you are executing, and this is one thing I will take a firm statement on, basically if you are using one of these to make a substantive decision, you are in fact kind of forwarding this bias on that group.
To switch a little bit, I often see going through social media, they're always suggesting this list I can buy that tells me the best AIs for different things and what to use and all of that. If you're out here a novice curious to get involved with using AI platforms, ChatGPT seems to be the one everyone has heard about. Does it make a difference which one you go to? Are they all using basically the same technologies? Are there certain AI services or programs that you should be using for certain things, or pretty much are they all grabbing from the same?
They've actually become extremely differentiated just this year. So I teach a course in Introduction AI to Business, and it wasn't the case. They were not differentiated when I started this semester, and I had to completely update my slides as I went.
Wow. Crazy.
So ChatGPT is much better in the image generation side of things, and they're probably going to advance towards video generation with Sora releasing shortly. I find Google's tool, Gemini, to be much better in terms of answering questions and handling core operations. And there's a website you could look at called LLM Arena or LM Arena, which basically ranks those by user preference. So I think when Google released their most recent model, they basically beat the competition in preference by 10%. This was unprecedented in the time of the technology, basically. And if you want to know about basically existing tools you should use in your processes, the latest version has this web search capability, and it can search live models, even ones that came out today, and basically recommend those from its interaction on the website or on the internet. So
if you're using a particular program, should you continue to use the same one so it learns what you want as you move forward? Does
like
it
an algorithm?
Do that? Yeah. Does it pick up, this was a positive result that they come back to? Does it help you once you refine your question multiple times? Does it learn what you're looking for?
Absolutely. And you can absolutely do that. Sometimes, though, it's not advisable to continue on the same chat, because if that chatbot gets off to the wrong start, if it starts giving you material you're not interested in, it's much harder to pull it back to material that you are interested in if you were to just start a new chat window. They almost all of these services have an ability to edit your prompt. So if you see something wrong, basically you should go up and immediately edit that prompt to get back on the right track, and then you can continue this chat.
Edit or research?
Edit, so that you'll enter a prompt and it'll produce output.
I was getting very into the weeds.
And there's a pencil button, so you click that pencil button and rewrite the prompt, basically.
We did get a question offline that says, what are the environmental costs of AI?
So there's a lot of energy costs to basically manage these servers where the AI interactions take place. And it's I can't recall the exact number. It's ramping up to be basically a few percentage points of our energy output annually. Wow. So if it's overused or used inefficiently or used without consideration for environmental impacts, it can become something that we should monitor, especially if you start launching these video production generative AIs that will be a lot more cumbersome on what would you call it? Energy resources, we can just call it. Yes.
So, Josh, what would you say is one of the biggest misconceptions around AI?
Oh, I should have prepared for this question, actually. I hadn't. So there's a lot of them. I think one is the fact that it's basically advanced extremely quickly. It has not. As I mentioned, AI as a concept has been around for a long time. The technology behind it's been around since the 1940s. We just haven't had the capabilities to use it broadly up until the early 2000s, where we had the big data craze. That's the same underlying technology as we're using now. The big difference, though, is after 2017, when you had this transformer architecture developed that can basically assess context within a sentence, now the technology is a lot more accessible. Everyone can use it. To interact with a machine, you don't need to know computer language. You don't need to know coding. You just need to know whatever language it's trained in. One of the, I think there's 42 languages these models are trained in now. So if you know one of those, you can essentially tell a computer to do anything you could have with an advanced computing degree, with a caveat. You learn extremely valuable algorithmic development skills in those advanced computing degrees.
I did ask AI while you were answering that question, what is the biggest misconception about AI? And AI told me one of the biggest misconceptions about AI is that it's truly intelligent or conscious like the human brain in a machine.
Well, there you go.
Thank
Our
you,
AI expert is
there you go.
Josh Kaisen is a managing director of the Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence Institute at the University of Houston. Josh, thanks for joining us on Hello Houston.
Thank you so much for having me.
Fascinating.
And coming up, what do Houstonians want to see in the city entertainment-wise? What are we missing? Well, there's a new survey that found out, and we'll talk about that next on Hello Houston. Stay with us.
What you hear on this station, every report, every interview, every update, is only here because someone like you gave.
80% of Houston Public Media's funding comes from Houstonians like you. Our newsroom runs on support from you, our community.
You have the right to know what's going on, and you have the power to make sure others do too.
Join the community right now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
Houston Public Media brings to you PBS World, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on TV 8.6. Experience the personal connection behind the headlines with programming devoted to telling stories that humanize complex issues. PBS World helps us understand the movements, conflicts, and cultures that connect us all. PBS World on TV 8.6 and online at houstonpublicmedia.org.
Support comes from GiveMeTheVIN.com. Purchasing vehicles in minutes with the VIN or license plate, or by bringing the vehicle to Houston area offices. Details at GiveMeTheVIN.com. Support comes from Twin Liquors, a Texas family-owned home for wine and spirits since 1937. With over 100 locations across the state, Twin Liquors is proud to be part of the community. Orders available online at twinliquors.com for delivery or pickup. Support comes from Navasota Theater Alliance, presenting Crimes of the Heart, a story about the three McGrath sisters whose troubles seem grave and yet somehow hilarious. Performances April 25th through May 11th. Tickets at navasotatheater.org. Support for Houston Public Media comes from CertaPro Painters, offering residential and commercial painting services, from color consultations to full project management. Estimates and more at CertaPro.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. Call now, 713-440-8870, or email us at talk@hellohouston.org to get your comment in on today's topics. Here's Ernie Manouse, Celeste Díaz Schurman, and Frank Billingsley.
Fascinating show today.
Oh,
a lot going
very
on.
interesting.
I've learned a lot.
I know. And what I think is so interesting, too, is we have gone from very old world to very modern.
Yeah.
The Pope, the history of the church,
You
1,000-year-old.
write your vote on a piece of paper.
Put it in and
Yeah.
smoke to tell you, to AI.
Yeah.
And how those two worlds can exist in our world at the same time. And we're going to see something very historical happening in this voting for a new pope. Very traditional.
Ask
And
AI
yet-
who it's going to be.
I don't think they're going to know yet. It can't predict, as we learn. But, you can find things out also through surveys and questioning the people that exist today, Frank.
Well, and there was a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the survey that was conducted by the Hobby School of Public Affairs here at U of H on the quality of life in the Bayou City. And so we heard about some serious stuff then, but they also had a more fun side to this survey, asking people what they would like to see come to Houston. For instance, 60% of Houstonians are enthusiastic about getting a Women's National Basketball Association team. I had no idea we were even being considered a WNBA team.
We used to have one in 1997, the Comets, and they were very good. They won 4 championships.
They were very good.
So where did they go?
Where did they go?
Funding maybe, or I'm not exactly sure. But I think the WNBA might have closed a lot of their teams.
The answer is always money, isn't it?
Funding.
All right, 57% of Houstonians are enthusiastic about Houston getting a National Hockey League team.
One of those would be Craig Cohen.
He loves it. He's probably leading the way.
Probably.
Yeah. Our producer's telling us that the Comets went bankrupt. So
yeah,
you're correct about that.
Before you continue this, that's what I always think is interesting about surveys is people's wants and desires when filling out surveys might often be very different than where they'll put their money when it's in the real world.
Right. Well, they really
want
buy that
this
ticket
to exist, but they're not going to go to it.
Well, should the follow-up question be do you want this and would you pay for it?
Would you be willing to pay for it?
And how much?
Right.
That's right.
What else have you got for us?
All right. 45% only. I thought this would be higher. 45% of Houstonians are enthusiastic about Houston getting a major arena soccer league team.
Well,
we already have.
I thought we had the BBVA where the Dash and Dynamo play.
Yeah. Well, apparently that.
Maybe by arena they mean indoor.
And they mean a major soccer league. I thought we had a major soccer league. I thought the Dynamo were major, but what do I know about soccer? Maybe nobody knows anything about soccer. That's why it's only 45%.
Right.
Well, it's the MLS.
They didn't know we already had.
Yeah. Here's another 64%. This is interesting. We'd like to see Houston get a major theme park like Disney World or Universal Studios in Orlando. We did Astro World.
We had one.
What happened there? Did they go bankrupt too?
Yeah, well, that was the property. Which is fascinating because it was such a coveted piece of land. So they tore it down, and now it's empty.
It's just sitting there.
Probably still fighting over who gets it.
It's turned into a parking lot.
Yeah,
well, I think this
shows... They tore down Paradise and put up a parking lot.
I think this shows that Houstonians, we love our sports, and we're good at sports. Yep. And so I think it's one of those things where we know what we like, we'll get behind it. I cannot get behind, and don't come at me, but the Disney World or Universal Studios...
Oh, come on, you have kids.
I just don't. It's more of a destination.
You're not an amusement park person, are you?
I like them. I mean, I've been once in my life, but I don't know if Houston
needs
I don't
one.
know if we are a destination city enough to be that big of an attraction.
You'd have to go pretty far outside the city limits to really, because
they
do fireworks every night and all of that. I mean, nobody wants this in their backyard.
How about Fiesta Texas is, I think, on the fence.
Hello Houston Land. Okay. And big characters walk around with big paper mache heads of the three of us and greet people.
It'd be goodbye.
That sounds terrifying.
Really quick.
It would be shut down.
Shut down Houston.
Did you find out how many people in this survey want a third hour of Hello Houston? Was that one of their questions?
You can call us at 713-440-8870 or send us an email at talk@hellohouston.org and in the subject line put third hour of Hello Houston.
We're always interested in what you have to say, your thoughts, your questions, your comments. Always know that this show is here as a conduit for you to speak to our guests, to talk with us, to share your opinions with your friends and neighbors. We're here every day from 11 to 1.
Every day. And we're on YouTube. And this will become a podcast at 1 o'clock when it's over. It then becomes a podcast. And our producers will cut a 40-minute commuter cut that'll be ready by 3, so you can listen to that 40-minute podcast in your car on your way home.
If you're confused, ask AI to explain it all to you.
That's right. AI will
Celeste, take us home.
Well, that's a wrap of today's Hello Houston. Thank you so much for joining us. We love to hear from you.
Thanks for listening to Hello Houston.
And we will be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. right here on News 88.7.
Thanks for listening to Hello Houston. Join us every Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. to talk all things Houston. The Hello Houston production team includes Garrett Bowman, William Menjivar, Jen Altai, Todd Holslander, and Jim Kovacic. For the latest in local news, subscribe to the Hello Houston daily newsletter at HoustonPublicMedia.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
Support comes from St. Luke's Health and St. Luke's Foundation.